the hero of the wind. Following the adult timeline and the flood that sank Hyrule, we have the last of our combined heroes, the hero of the wind and the hero of spirits. We start our games with Wind Waker, followed by Phantom Hourglass, and lastly with Spirit Tracks. There is a manga, but it's a collection of funny shorts which are a delight to read, but doesn't seem to have any merit to what we will be talking about here, so we're just going to move right along. This will be our 7th adventure, sailing through the Zelda timeline. Now, before we start talking about the games, let's reiterate what we are doing here. We will be going over how JoJo had characterized wind in their comic Linked Universe, a comic series that follows 9 links answering the question, what would happen if all the links had to adventure together? I'm going over every link in the comic, and you can catch episode 0 where I explain what we're doing here in a little bit more detail below. I'll also be adding the next episode when that is done down below as well. Let's get into this. Hoist the sails, starting off with the games, and of course, Wind Waker. After the hero, before our current Link doesn't show up to save Hyrule, the great flood takes over the land, submerging the entire kingdom, leaving only islands from the tallest peaks. One of these islands, known as Outset Island, has a boy named Link living on it, along with his sister Errol and his grandmother. And it's his birthday! As of tradition, he must wear the hero's clothes. If you come back later in the game, you can actually change back into his old outfit. It's really fun. Anyways, during this time, a giant bird appears and girl falls onto the island in the forested area. Going out to see if he can help the girl. It turns out she's a pirate named Tetra, but that's not the last we see of this giant bird, as it kidnaps Errol. Now on a quest to find his sister, Link teams up with the pirate Tetra and her crew to find and save Errol. When Link does find Errol, the two of them are separated once again, but this time Link is saved by a strange, mysterious talking boat named the King of Red Lions, who tells Link about Ganondorf and his quest, to find Princess Zelda, mainly to get her piece of the Triforce. Now, on a quest to stop Ganondorf to save his sister, Link gets his hands on the Wind Waker, a conductor's wand that he can use to control the wind. And after befriending sages and digging up the 8 pieces of the Triforce of Courage out to the ocean, and of course obtaining the Master Sword, Link can finally face Ganondorf. In the process of learning Tetra is actually Princess Zelda, the King of Red Lions actually is also a member of the royal family. Absolutely insanity. He is the King of Hyrule. Or well, the old one, before it got flooded. Link and Zelda are able to team up and defeat Ganondorf and protect the Triforce, as well as the King of Red Lions, turning out to be the King of Hyrule, floods Hyrule once more. And of course, Link saves his little sister and, becomes a pirate. It's great. Sailing on to Phantom Hourglass, Tetra, in her most brilliant mind, decides to jump onto a ghost ship. What just so happens to kidnap her. Oops. And Link, in his brilliant mind, also jumps after it, ending up in the sea, only to awaken on Mercy Island by a fairy named Cecilia and an old man named Oshius. Oshius? Yes. While trying to find a ship to go after the ghost ship, Link teams up with Captain Linebeck, and the two of them, along with Celia, sail off to find the ghost ship on the SS Linebeck. Great name for a ship. In order to find the ghost ship, Link has to venture into the Temple of the Ocean King, but in the process, the temple drains the life of those who enter. So, using the Phantom Sword, Link is able to enter the temple, traveling the islands and venturing deeper into the depths of the temple. Link is able to finally get to the ghost ship to save Tetra, only for the creature Bellum to possess Linebeck, and Link to be forced to fight his friend. Saving Linebeck and defeating Bellum, Link and Tetra awaken on their pirate ship, and the crew tells them that it's only been 10 minutes, acting as if the entire adventure was a dream. Lovely, wonderful, only for Link to see Linebeck's ship sailing off in the distance. Was it really a dream? And lastly, conducting not only the winds but a train, we have Spirit Tracks. Now, we know in Zelda canon that this is a separate Link, but in Linked Universe canon, this is the same Link. Many years after Tetra and the Hero of Wind landed on these new lands of the Locomo tribe, the train tracks have started to disappear. Now, Link, trying to become a train conductor, ends up learning about these events and tries to help Zelda get to the Spirit Tower. Which, in the process, Chancellor Cole appears with a man named Byron, literally kills Zelda to take her body so the Demon King can take it. And now, Link and Zelda's ghost have to team up, fix the Spirit Tower, kill the Demon King, and put Zelda back into her own body. And yes, they do this. They literally defeat the Demon King and also bring Zelda back from the dead and save trains. This game is wild and I love it. From this point onwards, we will be calling Link by his hero title, the Hero of the Wind. Hi, hello, okay, so little editing lace here. I forgot to mention that Wind was also in Hyrule Warriors, which means that Wind has been on 4 adventures, which means that he has had the second most adventures in the entire chain, right behind Legend. Design. The Hero of the Wind's design is primarily based off of his original outfit in Wind Waker, namely the blue shirt and orange capris. He also has a pair of brown boots, and he doesn't wear his hat. He also has a joy pendant around his neck, along with the spoils bag on his belt. The weapon we see him using is the Phantom Sword from Phantom Hourglass, and his shield is the Shield of Antiquity from Spirit Tracks. In the games, Wind is able to cut and slash like normal, but this Link can do something real fun, which is steal weapons from enemies, which happens in Linked Universe. Woo! Things we've seen Wind use are the grappling hook, the Wind Waker, the pirate's charm, the skull hammer, the telescope, and his bow. And lastly in items is not really the item itself, but kind of the pose that he's using while using Wild's Sheikah Slate, which is Wind's Pictobox selfie stance. Now, when Wind fights in the comic, he is very agile and confident in his abilities. The others tend to be a little frightful about how he rolls around and flips out of the way of enemies. Wind knows how to dance around his opponents, and he pays attention to his surroundings. Magic effects. The Hero of the Wind gets the Phantom Sword. This entails that he is no longer affected by life-sapping magics, as well as the fact that he is able to stop time for a brief amount of time. How could this have affected him? It could boil down to the fact that, well, maybe Wind just looks younger than he actually is, and that's why whenever somebody comments on his age, he gets really upset. But then again, he is like 14, so you know. The Hero of the Wind may be the youngest member of the group, but underestimating him would be anyone's downfall. Wind is energetic and optimistic. He's eager to please and willing to help. Something to note is how much he's interested in what the others have to say, or things they are showing off. He's always there when someone is doing show and tell, showing that he greatly looks up to the others. But at the same time, he isn't afraid to speak up about stuff when he sees flaws in the others' logic. Now, before we get into Wind's character, let's start off with how he sees his equipment, namely the Master Sword. Out of all the links in the chain, I think Wind is the one who sees it as a tool the most. Wind is one of the 3 links in the chain that had to fix the Master Sword, restoring it to its former glory. And in the end, what did he do with it? He left it at the bottom of the ocean! He doesn't acknowledge it whenever it's brought up, but when Legend starts talking about how Wind should know how powerful it is because he used it, Wind responds with, "Who cares about that item?" Wind knows the Master Sword isn't the only answer to things, so they shouldn't rely on it constantly. Now he uses the Phantom Sword, and he does admit it's nothing compared to the Master Sword, but that's what he has now. And what he has is also out of spirit power, meaning the ability to nullify life-sapping magic and stopping time isn't in his arsenal anymore. Maybe 4 can help. Talking about his other equipment, Wind is one of the links that uses most of his items, taking up any position needed to help the fight. He plays support most of the time, and when he fights enemies, he is frightfully close, even to the point where Wild went and tried to protect him because of it. This is also seen in Shady Escape, where the entire chain is walking in a specific marching order. More on that in Warriors video. Wind is placed perfectly in the most secure location in the marching order. He's also in the only 3-person group in the order. It's not like he doesn't notice how the others treat him differently. He knows they all look down on him because he is currently the youngest, even though they all went through the same stuff he did. Wind is very expressive. He lets his thoughts be told, he can't help it. When he sees something wrong, he jumps in, commenting his opinion and arguing if the others don't agree with him. He knows what he's talking about and he has evidence to back it up, like when he brought Bellum up and having to fight to free his friend from the puppeteer. He's like this when Wild earlier as well, when Wild shows disgust towards the king of Hyrule. Wind has to defend him. That was his friend, someone he traveled with and knows only meant the best for his people. Or even earlier when Hyrule is worried sick about his Zelda, and Wind jumps in to encourage him that she's a tough girl. He speaks up. Another time this happens is when Wind is sure he is Time's successor, and when things aren't looking right, he brings up the Triforce of Courage and how it was split into 8 pieces, which was something Time never told anyone before, proving that he knows what he's talking about and backing it up with his knowledge. But at the same time, Wind doesn't have all the evidence or doesn't know exactly what he's talking about, and during this time he listens intently to the others, making sure he learns as much as he can from everyone. And one more thing, Wind listens to everyone's stories, but he will also hop in with his own. He's a very open book when telling his tales from his own adventures, never shying away from a good story. There's also the fact that if Wind doesn't have the evidence or any of the knowledge to back it up, he sits there quietly. Speaking about how he learns as much as he can, Wind greatly looks up to Time. He sees someone he could become when Time holds the Phantom Sword up to look at it. Wind's eyes shine, admiring the great hero he wants to become. But we are going to put a pin on that until we get to how Wind sees everyone, because we have to start at the beginning. And starting at the beginning, we have Sky. Wind and Sky don't really talk often. When they do, it's often shown with them either encouraging the other or Wind just being a menace to Sky for 0.5 seconds. Next up we have 4. 4 tends to reassure Wind, and in return, Wind goes out of his way to help him, like when forging Wild's new sword or when he has to save 4. Other than that, the two don't really talk often. Now we can talk about Time. Time is the leader of the group, and Wind looks up to him greatly. He sees someone he wants to become. Time doesn't treat Wind like a baby in the group. He can see someone who has the strength to handle himself and lets him do his thing. The two team up and Time doesn't really need to help Wind. Wind notices this and he gravitates towards him. Like when Wind calls everyone out for babying him and he ends up sitting next to Time, who comments on how he's a bad judge of age. Wind respects Time and sees Time doing the same back. There's also the fact that he figured out he was Time's successor from evidence he learned from legends and context, as well as what Ganondorf said to him during his fight. He sees himself in Time and sees the shining hero he could one day become, holding him on a pedestal. Moving on to Legend, Wind will be a menace towards Legend. The two have a very middle child and youngest sibling relationship where one will mess with the other, but at the same time Wind stands up for himself if an argument occurs. They tend to butt heads, but will team up and work together only seconds later if they have a common goal. They know when to put away their anger to help one another. Talking about Hyrule, Wind is shown reassuring Hyrule on his abilities and casually chatting with him. The two of them don't seem to have any problems with one another, as neither poke fun at the other, but then tend to just have short conversations. And Wind does tend to copy and follow Hyrule and Legend when they are doing stuff. Twilight acts like the worried older brother towards Wind, and he sees this and doesn't like it. Wind knows he can handle himself, and he doesn't like being treated like a child. He himself being an older sibling, Wind doesn't seem to put two and two together when Twilight comments on his age. He just gets flustered and goes and sits next to Time. Later on, when Twilight is injured, he's worried and scared for his friend, even running off on a wild goose chase with Legend to see if they could find anything to help. And he's ecstatic when Twilight is seen to be okay, even going as far to mess with Sky in the process of getting everyone. Then later on, Twilight is up and about, building up his strength, and as soon as Wind goes over to check on him, he immediately starts messing with him, acting like an older brother towards him. And in return, Wind responds in the most menace of a little sibling way possible, and their dynamic is adorable. Going on to warriors, Wind tends to treat him like the others, but he doesn't really talk to him often. But he does listen to him whenever warriors makes plans or tries to explain things to him. The two don't really talk often, and it's really sad. With Wild, the two of them don't really see eye to eye on the King of Hyrule front, but they also have actual conversations, like when Wind brought up his sister. Wild has a moment, but doesn't really remember. There's also the fact that the two can communicate with one another through the pirate charm and the Sheikah Slate. And lastly, they take photos together. They hang out and worry about one another, but that doesn't stop them from arguing occasionally. What kind of secrets could the hero of Wind have? Well, he's been on 3 adventures, and he seems to be pretty open about everything. There's only a few things he's hinted at and not really gone into detail on, other than the events of spirit tracks only being referenced in his shield. He's been fairly open about everything. But the one big secret for Wind is one he himself isn't even aware of. See, Wind technically isn't a Link. He doesn't have the hero's spirit. When time went back to the past, he doomed that timeline to have it no longer possess the hero's spirit. That's why the hero before Wind, in between Wind and time, didn't show up, and his Hyrule had to be flooded. And to be honest, this adds to his character. He isn't some destined hero, he's a kid who saw what was going on and stepped up. Ganondorf would have won if it weren't for Wind accidentally getting involved. And he found the scattered Triforce of Courage. It didn't choose him, he chose it. Alright, so this is the character I think will die. Alright, there's a few reasons why, but let's start off with, well, why. Before we go into the whole death flags part, one of two things will happen. Either Wind will be the one who dies, or Wind will be the primary reason why whoever does die doesn't stay that way. May I remind the class that Wind isn't only the hero of, the wind, but he's also the hero of spirits. And what happens to Zelda during the events of that game? That's right, she lost her body. Someone could get bonked, and Wind would be like, oh, I've seen this before, and there we go. No characters actually permanently die. But let's get into the death flags, starting off with the fact that he actively puts himself in harm's way to protect the others, as well as he tends to be easily pushed over by Dink, who has actively run up to him solely to knock him over multiple times already. If he was going to do a killing blow, that would be it. Now, the next part comes from Twilight Princess, and the fact that the Hero Shade states that he wasn't able to teach the next generation his skills, so he is teaching Twilight these abilities. This part kind of relies on how much we have seen Wind learn from Time, but at the moment we should be fine, unless if Time starts to give Wind sword lessons, then we should probably be worried. Another thing is the amount of times someone will say something ominous, then the camera will pan over to Wind. Like when Wild says, "We can't lose any of you, not a single one," and he looks at Wind. There's so many of these moments, it's very worrying. Lastly, again, Wind is technically not a Link. He may have the name Link, but he doesn't technically have the hero's spirit. So he probably doesn't have the same type of protections the others have, but There's also the fact that he's the youngest of the group, meaning that his odds don't bode well. The hero of the wind is the only link in the chain without the hero's spirit, but being the hero of spirits along with the hero of the wind, he fits into the group seamlessly. Wind is probably the most agile of the group, quite literally dancing around his opponents, being dangerously close constantly. He's confident in himself even if no one else is, being extremely expressive, unable to hide his feelings, as well as outspoken, leading to arguments on situations and problems he knows. Wind is the voice of information and able to listen intensely and piece together scraps of information gathered throughout time. Honestly, given the chance, Wind would probably be able to piece together the timeline order. He takes evidence he knows and applies it when need be. Wind is also very kind and just wants to help out. He is often seen helping with various different projects, like when Four needed help crafting Wild's new sword, or when Twilight was carrying heavy bags. Wind was there to help. Even if he may struggle with it, he will be there to give it his all. And the biggest evidence of him giving something his all, when he technically has no business being there in the first place, was quite literally the events of Wind Waker, where he became the hero of courage instead of the title being given to him because of his spirit. Lastly, Wind brings in a light to the group that none of the others can. The light of hope and being the youngest. Even if he hates that fact, it is still a fact. One that lets him bring hope and joy to an otherwise bleak journey throughout time. As members are injured and the serious matter of this journey becomes more prevalent, Wind holds the light that will lead them back from destruction. Let's just hope that light doesn't get snuffed out, or at least guides them home. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I am so sorry I didn't finish this video sooner. I had done Twilight's video during spring break, then quite literally I only did film thesis for the next 3 months straight, day in and out. My only breaks were class and other homework I had to do. Then I needed a minute to recover, and finally, I'm trying to get back into the groove of making scripted videos. Next episode, we will be doing the Hero of Warriors. I plan to jump straight into Warriors videos, so the wait won't be as long. Which means I'm kind of shooting for more early July this time, so it's not awfully long. Like last time, like this time. I'm sorry. But again, thank you all for waiting so gosh darn long. As usual, thank you Jojo for this amazing comic. If anyone wants to read the comic, link is in the description below. Please check it out and support Jojo in any way, shape, or form you can. Also, I stream every day. If anyone wants to chat about Zelda or, Linked Universe or any other game series or any other type of series you'd like to chat about, I stream, of course, and that will be in the description below as well. And one last thing, thank you again for waiting. You're all amazing. I'm sorry again. I'll see you guys all next time. Until then, bye-bye! Okay, so secret ending time. For today's secret ending bit, we have the fact that Wind is not the shortest. In a lot of series, the youngest tends to be the shortest as well, but not here. As well as how Wind takes selfies in Wind Waker is also shown in the comic, which is really fun. Alright, that is all. Have a good one. Until next time, guys. Bye-bye.